Hi, I'm Ken Schwaber.
I'm Sam Guckenheimer.
Hi,
Ken,
Sam.
Hey, Ken. Nice to see you again.
Good seeing you.
You know, Ken, when you called me a year ago and said, why don't we get Scrum.org and Microsoft together and start a crusade, what were you thinking about?
I was thinking about fixing a problem that I had been seeing for a while, and Martin Fowler first made infamous in his blog about flaccid Scrum. Now, I'm not sure what flaccid Scrum meant, but I had a sense it wasn't a good thing.
And we were very interested in Scrum because we saw Scrum as the leading process people were using with Team Foundation Server, and we saw this as where we wanted to take the Visual Studio products in the 2010 release. So we thought this was a pretty good opportunity.
Yep.
But you had a lot of background in this because of all the stuff you'd done since the Agile Manifesto and the work you'd done before. And what was going through your head?
Well, I've had a relationship with Microsoft on this for a while. I was back here in 2004 with a bunch of other guys and Dave Weller, who was the evangelist for Longhorn. And they were starting to grill us on, what sort of tools would really be helpful for an agile, a quick response development environment. So this is not out of the blue. This is out of respect for the types of tooling that you developed and what I think it can do for people.
Yeah, I appreciate the respect, but it seems like if we look at the industry statistics, Scrum is really widely adopted.
Big deal.
But the idea in Scrum is you deliver a potentially shippable increment of software for every product backlog item every sprint.
It's just like waterfall or any project thing where you're supposed to deliver something you can ship at the end, except so we can control it a little better, we make it so you have to ship like at least once a month. And if you don't ship, at least it could be shipped even if you can't. And this gives a tremendous amount of flexibility and control and risk management.
Yeah, but when you and I talked, I mean, the thing that came up for me was we saw that people were struggling with, what happens after the stand-up meeting, right? It was like, here's 15 minutes of a developer's day. What about the other 7 hours and 45 minutes?
Right.
Do they know how to do continuous integration? Do they know how to do test-driven development? Can they refactor appropriately? Can they manage their source trees? What happens when they work with a database tier? All these kinds of things that were basic engineering practices that were, not really being done up to the expectations that you'd set.
Well, we had the hope that extreme programming would really stay and have some traction, because it has many of the practices that engineers need to do to take some work and turn it into something that's high quality and done. But in the absence of it, we saw lots and lots of people who are adopting Scrum flounder. They would talk to the developers and they would say, here's some work we want you to do. You have a month because we're doing monthly sprints. And the developers, which is a small team of no more than 8 or 9 people, wouldn't have the skills to do it. They wouldn't either have the skills, which is the usual thing, and or they wouldn't have the tooling to do it. You can't do frequent releases if you don't have a full automated test harness. You won't know where you are if you aren't using continuous build. And when we would look at them, they'd say, wow, that was all hidden by waterfall. Thanks for exposing it. Now what are we supposed to do? And this was Martin Fowler's comment about flaccid Scrum, of the moment you bring in the telescope onto a short time box, you find out a lot of things that our people in our profession have forgotten how to do, never knew how to do, and certainly don't do on a day-to-day basis that are critical.
Yeah, and we were working on the tooling to help them do that.
Right, and you were hoping they'd be able to use it.
And we saw the interest in Scrum, and as I recall, you suggested, well, let's do the Professional Scrum Developer
You bet.
training so we can marry the problems that you were using Scrum to shine a light on with the tooling we were trying to offer to
Yep.
to help people get out of it.
Well, that was it. You had been teaching and pushing until that time. Here's tooling that if you guys use,
Yep.
you'll build good software. And I was pushing, you guys got to build good software, and if you don't, you should be ashamed of yourself. But no one was teaching them the bridge between.
Yeah, so what's the course that you think came out of it?
Well, you and I and Richard Hundhausen, Colin Bird, a bunch of guys worked on this very hard. We all had different opinions of what should be really stressed. And I really like what we came up with, which was you can't teach any one of these three items in isolation. That is, you can't teach people the engineering practices by themselves. You can't teach them the tooling without the engineering practices. You can't teach them how to be a Scrum team unless they have the tooling and the engineering practices to do so. So I really like the idea of taking a team, not just an individual person, a team of several people or a bunch of people, putting them into small Scrum teams and teaching them how to do the three simultaneously, with the goal being deliver something that we could potentially ship using all the stuff we just taught you. And let them flounder and learn and flounder and learn and succeed, and then go back and do it at their company. And I was delighted with what we came out with.
Yeah, I've been watching a few of the courses now, and I really see this idea of having people come in the course and then work as teams through a series of sprints to be a novel approach to
Yep.
actually creating a realistic environment in the classroom. And I think it's great that we've gotten all these MVPs around the world who are signing up now and getting
Yes.
certified as trainers. Where do you think it's all going to go from here?
Lord knows. I hope we have an impact. I really hope we have a dramatic impact. This is a little like the problem, though, that you can teach someone the right thing to do. They can know the right thing to do, but many of our software developers still live in an environment where they're pressured to deliver more and they stop doing the right thing to do. So this, to me, is part of a multi-pronged approach where our customers get quality products, we build them in a professional way, and it's all very open and transparent. So this, I think, is a key element, but it's not sufficient in and of itself.
Well, what else are you doing now with Scrum.org to address the broader pieces?
Well, we had a wonderful statistic out of Forrester Group, must have been about a year ago, and it said more companies are now using Agile than are using Waterfall. It's good. That was our intention at Snowbird. And of that, 84% of the companies using Agile are using Scrum. And I thought that was marvelous until we came across the statistic that only 46% of those companies using Scrum were doing iterative and incremental, which is, of course, the core element to Scrum. And I'm like, I've trained all these trainers, I've initiated all these programs, I've started all these things to train everyone how to do this. How could this be? You know, because, like I said, you roll your dice and you hope. And what I started recognizing were some of the aspects that we hadn't implemented in our previous efforts were actually testing the people who were taking the courses we were offering and ensuring that they knew what they were doing. And not only testing them and assessing them before we certify them and making sure they know what they're doing, but using that information to go back and assess the teachers and make sure that they are actually training people in a way that they will actually know what they're doing. So what we've done, a couple of things. One, we've more formalized the courseware. So it is much more rigorous, it can be personalized, but we are going to not have everyone make their own variation, come hell or high water, or how good or bad it is. The other thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing more rigorous training on the trainers, getting together with them frequently. And the third is, for the people that want to learn or may even think they already know and don't need training, certification programs where they can take, even just on the fly for free, assessments to find out where they stand. I think a lot of people that leave the courses don't know what they don't know. You take an assessment test and then, for better or worse, you know what you don't know, and hopefully it was because your instructor was bad, well, or maybe it was your instructor was good and you were asleep because you thought it was a college course, but at least you know what you don't know. And we don't have that now.
What's your guidance to the trainers around training versus coaching? Do you see that you want folks who can really perfect their performance as trainers, or do you think the coaching goes along with it for customers?
Wow, long answer to that one, which I'll shorten. A trainer, if they're a professional trainer and they only train for the course material, goes flat very quickly. They can't respond to the contextual situations. They can't respond to the questions. They can't think on their feet and lead people to conclusions and help them learn to think. They can just present. So a problem we've had in the past is training has become so lucrative that many people who would have been great coaches all fled to training. And now we're insisting that they have a ratio of maybe 12 maximum classes a year compared to the rest of the time they help people figure out how to use what they just learned to do. I think trainers without coaching is pretty irrelevant. I think coaching without training doesn't scale.
I think that's really a great improvement, because as you always teach, when you teach Scrum, there's a tremendous amount of context
Yes.
in the application, and that context varies enormously from company to company. I mean, is it regulated? Is it not regulated? What type of industry is it in? What's the existing terminology? What's the org structure? All these kinds of things have an impact.
The culture.
The culture, and frequently you're training people who go back and have these impediments around them that they don't necessarily know what to do about.
Well, something that many of them don't realize that we didn't really pick up on in the early years of Scrum is most organizations are structured, including their IT shops, their development organizations, toward a very predictive approach in which you plan and you say you will do and you do. And Scrum offers agility so that you can do the thing that optimizes value. This is inherently great, but at odds with the rest of the place where they come back to. And there's a big change thing that has to happen for this to succeed. And the moment they come back, they run into that difference between the cultures. So we try to help them with that, and that's where the it depends. And you vary. We've had some trainers who only teach courses and they say, interesting question. Well, it depends. Next question. And we've also had trainers who say, well, the answer is that. And everyone goes, oh, that worked. Go back to their work, and it doesn't work because that guy never was there. And so we try running the courses so that they're experiential. So here's an idea, here's a theory of how Scrum works. Now, if you run into this situation, why don't you guys, your table, your team, talk a little bit about what you think might work and share experiences. And if I have any experiences from my coaching that I think might help without them thinking it's the answer, I share those. But I'm really working hard, and I think all of us have to have a huge degree of humility of we have no idea unless we are walking in their shoes.
Yeah, I've seen you teach, and you do this this thing where you sort of inject a little bit of twist after an exercise, where you...
Oh, you mean the traps and tricks?
Yeah, traps and tricks.
Ah, well, training has to be fun for me too.
No, but it looks like, it really looks like part of your approach is to create the experience of dysfunction in the classroom so that you have some sense of what do you do when you go back home with these impediments around you.
Well, we have consciously built that into the Scrum Developer training, the Professional Scrum Developer training, so that the people get their first set of work they're going to do, and they lunge into their sprint, and they work their tails off, and then, people call the end of the sprint, say, so what have you got? And say, oh, well, nothing yet. Say, well, you were supposed to have something done. Why don't you? What did you not understand? Because just teaching, we've all gone to school. We all know how to sit quietly while it washes over us. Putting them in situations where they get to try using what you think they heard and having them realize that they have no idea what they heard because their habits and culture are so strong that the intellectual apprehension was minimal, is probably the most profound thing we can do.
Now, you've been working now on training the trainers, and I think we've got inner circle partners and MVPs from something like 15 countries who've been through the course. What's your impression?
The most horrible experience I ever had in my life.
Really?
Yeah. Not only are they rude, pushy, and intend to use this and help the world with it, but they pick on me all the time. They say, hey, this doesn't work, and where I work, and this doesn't work. I mean, I've got to really work and think, and this is really unfortunate.
So you wish we'd sent you a bunch of softies to train?
I actually would have preferred it. I mean, your customers may not have benefited as much, but personally, my own life would have been easier.
Well, that's a good retrospective.
I have loved working with these guys. When we work with the MVPs, the guys we've had in here working are the cream of the crop. And they're not only the cream of the crop in terms of what I can build with software, but how I work with my customers and the problems they have to get them to be able to use this beneficially. And it has been probably the most grueling 2 days of my, it's up there with grueling days of my life, but very, very professionally rewarding. It's been a pleasure. And no softies, thank you.
Well, that's great to hear about the community. So if you were...
Wait a second, you were in the last one, and you were the hardest person there. So what are you talking about?
I'm sorry I give you grief.
You are not sorry you give me grief. Your middle name is Grief.
No, that's a misspelling of my last name.
Oh, I see. Okay, good.
I get that with junk mail. If it says grief,
Sam
I know.
Grief.
If it's grief, I know the source because
Yes.
it's got to be junk mail. So if you were gonna talk to a customer, potential customer, someone who's already got Visual Studio 2010,
Yep.
or has Team Foundation Server, and
Good.
they're running, and
This is like a dev manager or a CEO, or who am I talking to?
Well, take your pick. I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of
Okay.
teams out there who have got the Microsoft Visual Studio stack, including TFS,
Good.
and they're going along doing what they're doing. Is there any reason for them to consider Professional Scrum Developer?
Probably not. I think it will complicate their lives and make them have to work harder. And I think if they're looking for nice, easy days in their office, signed parking spots, this is the wrong thing to do. But I think if I sit down with them and say, I understand, you bought this tooling from Microsoft. I understand you're using Scrum. What problems are you encountering that you want to solve now? They've been fairly consistent. They're like, well, we commit to dates and we never meet them. Our releases seem to be slipping. The quality of our product seems to be problematic. Our stabilization phase, where we get things ready to really ship, seems to be stretching out. The people seem to be dispirited. What other things might we have? Oh yeah, it's hard to introduce change into our projects. And our competitors are ruining us. And so we take that list and we say, so you thought buying Scrum, which was, by the way, very low price, and Visual Studio would solve your problem? You need to take your people and have them learn how to use that with modern engineering practices, and you need to watch what's going on and respond to the things that become visible about the problems they're encountering and help them. You do that and you can solve these problems. So I wouldn't do this if you don't want to work hard. I wouldn't do this if you don't want to fix those problems. But if you're a dead serious person who respects this profession and wants their customers to like us and respect us, here's your technique.
Well, my experience with our customers is most of them do try to do their best and do want to improve their velocity and do want to increase capacity, and that was a lot of the appeal of Team Foundation Server and a lot of the appeal of Visual Studio. So it sounds like it's a pretty appropriate combination.
Absolutely. I remember I wanted respect, and so I got a Mercedes. Kept driving into the same low-life bar and getting drunk and thrown into the jail. So strangely enough, just buying the Mercedes didn't get me respect. I don't know if you can believe that. I had to actually change my life. And so interesting thing about what we're offering, this training course, this intense experience, is when these guys come back, they're going to encounter lots of things that get in the way of them doing stuff the way we've been helping them learn. And their management now has an opportunity to go after those things and fix them. But it's not as easy as just sending them to our session and the Mercedes and they feel better. It's hard work.
What's your favorite hard work success story?
I had a customer, Primavera, where I worked with their Vice President of Engineering, Bob Schatz. And we started using Scrum. Bob's a pretty active guy. And within the first 3 or 4 months, we uncovered so many problems that we used to just look at each other in despair. We would never look back at the things we had done right. Instead, we would look at the problems we'd uncovered, like marketing wasn't really prioritizing their work accurately, no one was optimizing against the value of what they could deliver, all these things. And by the time we got to 6 months, Bob and I were drinking so much that we had to go to AA. Because the problems you encounter as you try shifting from one development approach to another are pretty staggering. And it really takes some determination, dedication, and constantly looking back at the progress you're making to sustain it.
Yeah, one of the things we found using Scrum here at Microsoft is that folks struggle with the idea of done.
Isn't that a weird word?
Done?
Yeah, who would have guessed that we would talk about done?
Who would have guessed that we would talk about done?
Done undone.
Right. That you'd have to say done to mean it's really done.
Right.
And we did all these things like check-in policies and gated check-in and introduced easy ways for iteration reviews and retrospectives and things like that in the tooling. But we really, and here internally, we now have these strong definitions of done. But I really see this as something that still isn't associated that closely with Scrum, and a lot of folks who would claim to be Agile don't really get. Do you encounter that? Yeah?
I'll say, think of financial meltdown we just had, and everyone thought they knew where things were, but it turns out no one knew where everything was because it was all buried under different places and tranches and hedges and things like that.
It was all off balance sheet.
Yeah. Well, very much the same with us. We take people, we put them into a sprint, we say, get something done so a customer can potentially use it, and they say, okay, well, to get it all done, we won't do that, we won't do that, we won't do that, we won't do that, we won't do that. And they give us something which looks like a good balance sheet, but the moment the economy starts faltering, you really regret ever having gotten it. And it's been a bear of a realization for all of us to say, if I could select 3 things and cut the quality and deliver them all to our customer, maybe I should really instead be only selecting 2 things and getting them really done, because the other stuff's going to come back and haunt me. It's the same amount of stuff, but once I let it out the door, the work to remediate it is a lot more. And this is where done becomes an issue. You come to a daily sprint review and you say, so show me what you did. You say, here it is. You say, that's not done. You say, oh yeah, it is. No, it's not. I can't use it. Yeah, but it's all we could do in the time. You say, so it's done to you, but not done to me. And that's not transparency, which is what's needed for control, risk management, and all the other things. And it's a little embarrassing being in a profession, including myself, where we cut corners so much, thinking that delivering more, regardless of quality, is the issue. That's okay if we're talking about a website, but if we start moving into advanced medical techniques where this technology we're building is like a little nano robot cleaning out your veins, I hope we do a little better. Actually, so do our customers.
I hope we do better on websites too.
Yeah. Well, at least, my order just goes astray and I get something else. Nano robot going elsewhere in my things might not be as good.
So do you ever see a good definition of done, a team able to put it together without tooling?
Not without tooling, no. When you say, as you're building things piece by piece by piece, that you have to be checking that the other stuff you already did works with what you just did, if you can't go back and analyze and assess that and prove that it continues to work rapidly, you get bogged down, so the amount of work that you do diminishes significantly every time. Not only that, you never know that it really works.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we put a lot of emphasis in TFS on not just continuous integration, but the test workflow associated with that,
Right.
and deployment into the lab, and even prior to that, gated check-in after our experiences here. And what I hear you saying is that you really think that's part and parcel of defining done and working in a Scrum team.
A friend of mine once said that the optimum development environment, so you know exactly where you are at any time, would be a Microsoft with all of its code bases, all of its products, and anytime someone wrote a bit of code, it would immediately check in to the build system. Builds would be done, all the test harnesses would be run against it, and any flaw that it caused there or anywhere in the rest of the product lines that are at Microsoft, a notification would be immediately sent to anyone who's affected as well as the person who broke it, and that would take place within a nanosecond.
Well, you just described gated check-in.
Nanosecond, good.
Nanosecond depends on how much is being built.
Well, that's why I wanted this, because Adobe, places like that, they have huge code bases. And yeah, my part works, so.
Yeah, now you can have a sufficient build lab with
Right.
parallelization in the build and different things running the appropriate unit tests, and it may not be a nanosecond, but it's as quickly as possible on
Well, that's what we want to
available
get to.
resources. We'd love to get to a nanosecond
That way,
too.
I just wrote some funky code, I checked it in, and as you're sitting there writing code, you should stop because what I did just corrupted what you were trying to do.
It's
That'd be nice.
exactly what gated check-in gets you.
Either that or we'll have to fall back to first 50-person companies.
Yeah, that'd be hard for us to do.
Yes, and your customers would be very disappointed at your products.
So, Ken, you were one of the guys at Snowbird in 2001 who signed the Agile Manifesto, right?
Right.
And that was positioned at the time as, the manifesto heard round the world, the shot heard round the world, and a whole bunch of things were supposed to change. What did you think then, and what do you think about it now?
Well, I remember I come from Lexington, Massachusetts, and the Buckman Tavern is where everyone drinks there. And people came rolling out of there because the British were marching through our town and interrupting their time and interfering with them. And they would have never guessed that just protecting their territory was something that would grow huge. When we got together, it was, I think, a lot fomented by Jim Highsmith and Bob Martin, of people who were trying different approaches at software development and had published papers and were talking to each other. And we just thought we should get together And when we're getting together, we're discovering that we had all these things in common, and we distilled it to, and it wasn't because we were trying to do anything, it's just, as object-oriented people, you always want to distill and normalize. So we come up with a value statement, we came up with principles, and then Jim Highsmith said, this might be really neat, why don't we publish it? And Ward Cunningham says, I'll put it up by Wiki. And we would have never guessed at what it was going to start. We were stunned. We were at Uppsala, so we met in February. We're at Uppsala in Tampa in, I think, July, August. And we're getting all of us are getting pressure from all these people who want to join. And we're like, join what? No. And so Ward said, geez, maybe I'll put a board up on my wiki where people can sign and say they support this. And then I thought, well, okay, why don't we start a group, and we called it Agile Alliance, that people can join, or at least there'll be a focal point. And maybe this goes back to the idea of like a complex adaptive system and a tractor.
Yeah.
So that became an attractor for people. And I'll tell you, we did not cause this. This was something brewing that we simply put our finger on, and it burst. And I've been delighted that it burst. I would have never guessed.
But then you started, Scrum really started taking off, and XP started taking off. And then something happened. There was a period when it felt like there were a huge number of success stories, and I guess it's maybe what Gartner calls the hype curve was going way high. And then here we are 9 years later, and Scrum's on everyone's tongue.
Indeed.
But
That's a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
Are the practices what you expected?
No. I'm very pleased with a large number of instances. I'm very pleased that people often see an alternative to waterfall. Ford, our U.S. auto industry is a example of this. They've had compelling evidence that the way they went about things for 30 or 40 years wasn't as good as other people's. And yet they have been unable to change their culture because it's so embedded, plus it's been successful, despite compelling evidence that they were in deep trouble. When we released Scrum, XP, all those things, those are great approaches. They really work well, but they are contrary to the normal culture. And what we ran into big time were people, maybe 15, 20% of the people who use Scrum, going through the hard work to make a culture change and really become the best software organization they could be. And the other 80% saw what it would take and blanched and proceeded a little of the way, some of the way, used Scrummed words, got away from waterfall, but I would suspect those 80% of the places are not really great places to work. Our hope, our focus, particularly like with this type of training, is it'll help more people and more people improve. But I think when all gets done and said, perhaps only 30% of the people now building software will have transitioned to this way of working.
Now, you came here to Microsoft, I think, in 2004. It was shortly after I joined. And I wasn't in the background to that visit, but what was the idea then when you came to visit us?
Well, it was started by Dave Weller, who's one of the evangelists here, and he was working with the Visual Studio team, and he really understood Agile. And so he invited, I think it was Ron Jeffries and Ward Cunningham and myself and a couple others, to talk about, given the way we built software, what sort of tooling would be most appropriate in Visual Studio so that we would have that automation that we wanted. I mean, Kent Beck had gone off and done JUnit, but that wasn't quite enough. And much to his credit, he had in that room the people who then took those ideas, meshed them with what they knew was possible and what they were doing, and have rolled this out until you and I are working together today.
Yeah, I joined a little bit before that time, and
Yep.
and really joined because of this vision of taking Visual Studio from its heritage, which was to be the best IDE for an individual,
Yep.
right? For one developer working in isolation, to growing it to be
Yep.
the best environment for a team, or indeed for a team of teams. And it was that vision of supporting the team that drew me to Microsoft.
Yep.
And it's that vision that we've been working to enact with every release of TFS and the Visual Studio stack. So now, the idea that we can take Scrum, the practices and the learnings around Scrum, and we can take that tooling and we can marry it with the skills development and a professional Scrum developer training, I think is pretty cool.
I think it's extraordinarily cool, and I think we've lost our minds. When we had Visual Studio for one person, we could successfully get them to use it right. When we had it for 8 or 9 people, a lot of effort, they would actually enjoy and use it and optimize to it. Now we're saying, let's try to get 500, 600, 700 people to actually do agile software development with this tooling. And this, that was a little harder.
Do you know how many people we have on the DevDiv instance of TFS using Visual Studio on this one server?
6, 7?
3,500 now, active. That is measured as
3,500?
3,500 who, if you take the measurement of who's done something in the last 7 days,
Yeah.
7 calendar days, it's now up to 3,500, organized as small teams,
Yep.
okay, and then larger groups of teams and larger groups of that, and it's not one backlog across those 3,500, but it's fewer than 10.
And it has to all roll together toward one product.
Exactly. So we've really been applying this idea of working from a product backlog and trying to work in self-organizing teams at the level of the product backlog item within a monthly time box, a sprint, and then across a project, synchronizing the review of those so that you have a view of how the product together integrates,
Yep.
and the stakeholders can look at that together in the review.
Do you still have the idea that if anyone breaks the build, they have to run the build until someone else breaks it?
No, we actually have a team that takes care of the build infrastructure.
I remember from Microsoft Secrets, that was the approach on MT, and it always struck me as a great idea.
It is a great idea. It's a little more complicated now. The build machinery,
3,500 people.
the build machinery is complicated enough that there's a team that worries about it and worries about the test runs that go with it, and so forth. And
Yep.
we're now actually moving from the on-site build lab to starting to build in the cloud.
Yep.
And that's the basis for where we think we're going forward. Today with TFS, we've put in place most of the things that we have been using internally for build, including the gated check-in, including parallelization, including deployment into virtual labs, including the running of tests on those labs as soon as the software is deployed, and the reporting of that back into a web-based portal. So you have a build report effectively with automated release notes where you can click into what's available, and you can look at the change sets behind that, and you can inspect the test results and so forth. So that degree of automation is something that we've now taken from internal practices into TFS. Where we're going internally is to try to, in our next wave, move more of that into cloud services. And of course, that'll be over time where we take the product line as well.
I'm delighted I can listen to you and understand what cloud means. It's such a buzzword. You don't have to install it on your machine, right?
Well, yeah, so it means we don't have to, the vision is that instead of you're having to maintain this rack of machines,
You bet.
you plug in and it's available when you need it with,
Including the whole VS infrastructure.
yeah.
So you're renting it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's not, I mean, the big deal is not the renting, it's that you make capacity someone else's problem.
More than capacity, what you're making is the setting up of it someone else's problem. It's a probably the most valuable person in the world is the build engineer.
Yeah, so you're doing, so yes, you will, the idea is you'll be able to move some of that out, and you'll be able to have, to not have to worry about scaling for peak demand.
Yep.
And that's the Azure vision.
Yep.
We're not there yet, but the idea is that we take, we take what we do in-house and what we dog food ourselves, and we inflict the learning pain on ourselves so that our customers don't need to repeat it.
I wish you'd hurry up, because when we teach these courses, if we simply connected into the cloud rather than having to go through this whole machine setup, it would be so much easier and foolproof.
Okay, I'll put that on the backlog, Ken.
Great. Next one.
I'll put that on the backlog, and we'll schedule the product backlog item, and we'll take it in the appropriate sprints.
You know what strikes me, your description of the 3,500 people working in this environment? When I first worked with Microsoft, it was known for its individual brilliance. The cowboy who could make anything happen. And I remember in the various talks I would give here, a reaction was, we were hired for what we individually do and my skills, my brilliance, and you're saying we're going to work on a team and even help others. I mean, give me a break. And what you're describing is an extremely different culture.
That's right, and there's been a lot of learning to get there.
Yeah.
I think there's, in fact, there was an interview, I don't remember where I saw this, with Bill Gates, within the last year, where someone was asking him, so Bill, what did you learn and what do you wish you'd done differently? And his remark was, I learned it's not all about IQ. And what we've learned is that it's about being very clear about customer value and being very clear about things like engineering practices to get us to done, so that we can accelerate the flow of value to the customer, and listening to those customers so that we can clearly prioritize the business value and create a repeatable process where we can, in monthly sprints, deliver value. Or potentially deliverable value.
Well, particularly you get to cloud and you're not into shipping out the stuff that everyone has to install. So you can be delivering that just like a web portal. You know, it struck me when you were talking about this, one of the biggest things our customers, the people who are using this and have the people in the courses are going to have to do is this transition like Microsoft from when I first met them to now. And I'm not sure, Tracy Kidder with his books, I'm not sure if you should get him in here as a sociologist to write about this so other people can read the story.
It's an interesting idea.
Tracy, you out there?